You ever wake up one day and realize your entire life has been a lie? Not in a dramatic, movie-like way where everything unravels in an instant. No, it happens in pieces. A slow, gut-wrenching realization that creeps up on you little by little until, one day, you're staring at your reflection and wondering how the hell you ended up here. That was me 3 years ago. I remember the moment like it was yesterday. Not because it was loud or explosive, but because of the sheer silence that followed. It was the kind of silence that breaks you, the kind that settles deep into your bones, making you feel like you're drowning in the absence of sound. It was a Wednesday, a regular, unremarkable Wednesday. I had woken up early, made coffee, and sat by the window, watching the world wake up around me. Emily was still asleep. She always slept in on her days off, and I never minded, but something felt off. You know how sometimes your gut whispers things to you? That quiet, nagging feeling in the back of your mind that something isn't right. I've been ignoring that voice for months, maybe even years. But that morning I couldn't shake it. I don't even know what I was looking for when I picked up her phone. I wasn't the kind of guy who snooped. I trusted her. I wanted to trust her. But trust is a funny thing. It's only real until the moment it isn't. And the second I unlocked her phone, mine was gone. One message, one name, one moment, and everything came crashing down. I don't remember how long I sat there staring at the screen. Could have been seconds. Could have been hours. Time didn't make sense anymore. The words blurred together, but the meaning was crystal clear. She wasn't just lying to me. She wasn't just sneaking around behind my back. She had built a whole other life, one I was never supposed to know about. I stood up, phone still in my hand, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in on me. Emily was still sleeping, completely unaware that the world she had built on deception was about to come crumbling down. And that's when I made the decision. I didn't scream. I didn't wake her up. I didn't demand answers or explanations. I just left. No note, no goodbye, no trace. I walked out of that house, got in my car, and drove. And I didn't stop. I disappeared for 3 years. And when she finally found me, the words she said left me speechless. I didn't have a plan. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't take my laptop, my wedding ring, or even my favorite jacket. I just walked out, slid into my car, and drove. The only sound in that moment was the low hum of the engine and the occasional whoosh of passing cars. It was surreal, like I was floating above my own body, watching a man unravel in real time. At first, I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to be anywhere but there. I kept driving, watching the miles stack up on the odometer, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't even thinking. I was just moving. I must have driven for hours before my body forced me to stop. Somewhere along a nearly empty highway in the middle of nowhere, I pulled into a gas station. My hands were still shaking when I stepped out of the car. The air was colder than I expected, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat in my chest. I stood there for a moment, staring at my reflection in the car window. I looked like a stranger. It hit me then. I had nothing, no plan, no direction, no clue what I was supposed to do next. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. I went inside the gas station, grabbed a coffee, and sat down at one of those grimy plastic booths in the corner. The kind of place where time seems frozen, where the fluorescent lights buzz just a little too loudly, and the smell of burnt coffee lingers in the air. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen like it held the answers I didn't have. Do I text her? Do I call? Do I demand an explanation? My fingers hovered over the screen, but I couldn't do it. I didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't want to read her excuses. So instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I deleted everything. Her number, our messages, every photo, every email, every single digital trace of her. It felt like cutting off a limb, like severing the last thread tying me to the life I had just abandoned. And then, without thinking, I did the one thing that changed everything. I threw my phone into the trash. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the exhaustion, the anger, the sheer desperation to not exist in the world I once knew. But in that moment, it felt right. If I was truly leaving, then I had to vanish. No phone, no GPS, no way for anyone to track me down. I left the gas station, got back in my car, and drove. For 3 days, I lived like a ghost. I stayed in cheap motels, paid in cash, and avoided talking to anyone. I didn't check the news, didn't open my emails, didn't even think about reaching out to friends or family. I just ceased to be. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. But freedom, I would soon learn, comes at a cost. Because 3 years later, when she finally found me, the words she spoke destroyed me all over again. You'd think disappearing would be the hardest part. Walking away from everything, cutting every tie, living with nothing but the clothes on your back and the weight of your own choices pressing down on you. But the truth is, leaving was easy. The hard part came after. The first few weeks were a blur. I moved like a ghost, drifting from town to town, never staying in one place for too long. I avoided major cities, paying in cash at motels that didn't ask too many questions. I worked odd jobs, things that paid just enough to keep me moving but never tied me to one spot. Construction gigs, barback shifts, even a short stint at a car wash. I learned to live with less. I learned how little a man actually needs when he's running from everything. At first, I told myself this was temporary, that I'd stop when I felt ready, that I just needed time. But time had a funny way of stretching itself thin. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and before I knew it, I had built a whole new life, one that existed entirely outside of the man I used to be. I settled in a small coastal town, the kind of place where people don't ask too many questions as long as you keep to yourself. I rented a tiny apartment above a mechanic shop, paid in cash, and kept my head down. I started working for the owner, fixing cars, changing oil, basic stuff, but it kept my hands busy, kept my mind from drifting to her. But no matter how far I ran, she was always there. In the quiet moments, when the world slowed down and my thoughts caught up to me, I saw her in the ocean waves, in the headlights of passing cars, and the way couples laughed over dinner at the diner I frequented. Emily was everywhere, even though she had no idea where I was. And then came the dreams. At first, they were just shadows, faint memories of our life together, blurred at the edges. But as the months wore on, they became more vivid. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, convinced I had just heard her voice. Sometimes, in the dreams, she was apologizing. Other times, she was laughing, whispering things I couldn't quite understand. And in the worst ones, she was simply gone, vanishing right before my eyes, just like I had vanished from hers. I told myself I was over it, that I had made my choice, and there was no turning back. But deep down, I knew better. And then, after 3 years of silence, the past came knocking. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I was in the garage wiping my hands on a rag when the shop phone rang. The owner, Jim, answered like always. I barely noticed until he turned to me, eyes narrowed, and said, "Hey, someone's asking for you." I froze. No one ever asked for me. No one even knew my real name. I walked over, heart pounding, and took the phone. "Yeah." And then I heard her voice. 3 years. 3 years. And she still had the power to freeze my blood in my veins. "Ethan," she breathed, like she couldn't believe I was real. "I finally found you." I gripped the receiver so tightly my knuckles turned white. My entire body locked up, torn between slamming the phone down and demanding to know why the hell she was calling me. I opened my mouth, but before I could say a word, she whispered the sentence that would shatter everything. "There's something you need to know, and it's about our son." I didn't answer right away. Couldn't. My mind had already split in two. One half trying to process what she had just said, the other screaming at me to hang up and never look back. Our son. That wasn't possible. We never had kids. That was one of the few things Emily and I had always agreed on. She said she wanted to focus on her career. I said I wasn't sure I'd ever be the father type. It wasn't a point of tension. It was just the way things were. And yet, here she was 3 years after I disappeared, saying the one thing that could rip the ground out from under me. I swallowed hard, my grip tightening on the phone. "What the hell are you talking about?" There was silence on the other end. Not the awkward kind, not hesitation, the kind of silence that's filled with something heavy. Then finally, she spoke. "Ethan, I found out I was pregnant right after you left." Her voice was unsteady, like she'd been rehearsing this moment for years, but still didn't know how to say it out loud. "I didn't know how to find you. I tried everything, but you were just gone." I shut my eyes, inhaling sharply. My head felt like it was full of static. No, this had to be some kind of lie. Some desperate attempt to drag me back into the past. She was good at that. Twisting words, making things sound more important than they were. But she'd never stoop this low, would she? I forced myself to stay calm. "And now, 3 years later, you just happen to track me down. And you expect me to believe this?" She let out a shaky breath. "I didn't track you down, Ethan, I swear. I wasn't even sure I wanted to call. But then something happened, and I knew you needed to know." Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to care. But the words came out before I could stop them. "What happened?" More silence. Then softly, "He's sick." The world tilted. I grabbed onto the counter, grounding myself, trying to fight back the sudden wave of nausea. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake up and find out this was just another one of my nightmares. But the way she said it, the quiet heartbreak in her voice, I wasn't ready for this. But it didn't matter because, ready or not, my past had just caught up to me. The truth comes in waves. For a long moment I didn't move. The air around me felt heavy, pressing in on my chest. Jim, my boss, was watching me from the other side of the garage, his usual bored expression shifting to something closer to concern. I must have looked as bad as I felt. I turned away, lowering my voice. "Emily, if you're lying." "I'm not." She cut me off, her voice firm, desperate. "Ethan, I swear on my life, I would never lie about this." "She would though, wouldn't she?" I ran a hand over my face, trying to keep my emotions in check. I had spent years training myself not to care about her, not to care about anything that reminded me of the life I had left behind. But now, with just a few words, she had cracked open something I wasn't sure I could close again. And the worst part? A tiny, horrible part of me wanted to believe her. I exhaled, forcing my voice to stay even. "What's wrong with him?" A sharp inhale from her end. Then softly, "He has a heart condition. We've known for a while, but it's gotten worse. He needs surgery." My breath caught in my throat. I barely heard the rest. Something about specialists, the risks, the money she didn't have. My pulse was roaring in my ears. I couldn't process it. It was too much. And then she said something that made everything inside me turn cold. "Ethan, he looks just like you." I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. That wasn't fair. That wasn't something she could just say and expect me to accept. "I don't even know if he's mine," I said before I could stop myself. The silence that followed was deafening. Then finally, "You do. You've always known." I closed my eyes. She wasn't wrong. Nowhere left to run. I don't remember much of what I said after that. I think I told her I'd call her back. I think she tried to say more, but I hung up before she could. My hands were still shaking when I set the phone down on the counter. I felt like I was outside of my own body, like I was watching myself from a distance, seeing a man who had spent 3 years running finally hit a dead end. Jim walked over, rubbing his chin. "Something tells me that wasn't just an old friend." I let out a humorless laugh. "Not even close." He studied me for a moment. "You all right?" "No, not even a little." But I just shrugged. "I need some air." I stepped outside, inhaling deep, hoping the salty ocean breeze would clear my head. Didn't. The weight of Emily's words was still there, sitting on my chest like a stone. I had a son, and now I had a choice to make. For 3 years, I had convinced myself I didn't owe anyone anything, that walking away had been my only option. But now, standing there in the late afternoon sun, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Doubt. Because if what she was saying was true, if this boy really was mine, then disappearing had never been a clean break. It had been a wound that never stopped bleeding. And if I turned my back now, I might never get another chance to fix it. I had spent 3 years running. Maybe it was finally time to stop. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed that phone call over and over, dissecting every word, every pause, every ounce of emotion in Emily's voice. It had been 3 years. 3 years since I last saw her. 3 years since I forced myself to forget. And now she was back. Not with apologies, not with explanations, but with a child. A child I never knew existed. A child who, if she was telling the truth, was mine. I had so many questions. Was she lying? Was this some elaborate scheme to pull me back into her orbit? And if it was true, if this kid really was mine, why now? Why wait 3 years? More than anything, though, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Fear. I had built a new life from nothing, carefully stitching together an existence that didn't include my past. And now, with one phone call, all of it was unraveling. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself to ignore it, to push it away, to let it become just another ghost in my rearview mirror, I couldn't, because deep down I already knew. I knew I had to go back. By the time morning came, I had made my decision. I told Jim I was taking some time off. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded, handing me an envelope of cash from the jobs I hadn't collected payment on yet. "You sure about this?" he asked, watching me pack up my things. No, not even a little, but I still nodded. "Yeah. Guess we both knew this day would come," he said with a small smirk. "You don't strike me as the kind of guy who runs forever." If only he knew. I left that afternoon. 3 years ago, I had gotten in my car and driven as far as I could from my past. Now, I was retracing my steps, heading right back into the storm I thought I had escaped. And the closer I got, the worse the weight in my chest became. The drive back to my hometown was a long one. I had left in such a hurry before that I never realized just how much distance I had put between myself and the life I abandoned. Hours passed in silence, the radio playing softly in the background, but I barely heard it. My thoughts were too loud. By the time I reached the outskirts of the city, it was dark. The familiar streets looked the same, but they felt different. Like walking through a place you once dreamed about but hadn't set foot in for years. I hadn't told Emily I was coming. I didn't know if I even wanted to see her face. But as I pulled up in front of our old house, the one I had walked away from all those years ago, my stomach twisted into knots. I sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to find the courage to step out. And then the front door opened. My breath caught in my throat as she stepped onto the porch, her silhouette illuminated by the porch light. She hadn't changed much. Her hair was a little longer, her posture a little more tired. But when she saw me, really saw me, her expression was something I couldn't quite place. Shock, relief, fear. And then, before either of us could say a word, something else happened. A small figure appeared behind her. A child. A boy. And the second I saw his face, I knew. I didn't need a test. I didn't need an explanation, because staring back at me with eyes that were too familiar to deny was my son. I don't know how long I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. The world outside felt unreal, too quiet, too still, like time had stopped the moment I saw him. My son. The boy stood next to Emily on the porch, his small hand curled into the fabric of her sweater. He couldn't have been older than 3, which meant she hadn't lied. The timeline lined up. The realization hit me harder than I expected, leaving me breathless. Emily was staring at me, eyes wide, unreadable. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or terrified. Then, before I could force myself to move, the boy tilted his head. His gaze locked onto mine, and then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that kids give freely, without hesitation, without knowing what it might mean to the person receiving it. A simple, bright expression that made my chest tighten in a way I wasn't ready for. That was when I knew I couldn't just drive away. Not this time. I forced my hands off the wheel and reached for the door handle. My legs felt heavy as I stepped out, like I was wading through something thick and suffocating. The cool night air did nothing to clear my head. Every step toward the house felt surreal, like I was walking through someone else's life. By the time I reached the bottom of the porch steps, Emily finally found her voice. "Ethan." I swallowed hard. Being this close to her again after everything felt wrong, like I was trespassing in my own past. She took a hesitant step forward. You really came. I nodded, but I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at him. The boy stared up at me, wide-eyed, curious. He had my dark hair, my nose, but his eyes, those belonged to Emily. There was no doubt in my mind anymore. He was mine. He didn't know who I was, though. I was a stranger to my own son. The thought nearly made me turn around and walk right back to my car. But then the boy did something unexpected. He let go of Emily's sweater and took a small step toward me. I froze. He studied me for a moment, then pointed at my boots. You got dirt on your shoes. It was such a simple observation, but it shattered something inside me. I let out a shaky breath, forcing a small, humorless smile. Yeah, I guess I do. Emily let out a quiet laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. He notices everything, just like you. The weight of that statement settled deep in my chest. I didn't deserve to hear that. I didn't deserve to be compared to a child I had never met. But standing there, looking down at him, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't leave. Not yet. I turned my gaze to Emily. Can we talk? She nodded, her shoulders tense. Yeah. Come inside. I hesitated, glancing down at the boy again. He was still watching me, his small hands tucked into the pockets of his hoodie. I forced a deep breath and took the first step onto the porch. And just like that, after 3 years of running, I stepped back into the life I had abandoned. The house hadn't changed much. The furniture was the same, the photos on the walls untouched. But everything felt different. The air was heavier, as if the walls remembered everything that had happened, everything that had been left unsaid. Emily led me into the living room, gesturing for me to sit. I hesitated but eventually lowered myself onto the couch. It was the same one I used to sit on after long work days, back when I thought my life was stable. Now it felt unfamiliar. The boy climbed onto a chair across from me, kicking his feet absent-mindedly. He didn't seem nervous, which somehow made this even harder. Emily sat beside him, her hands clasped together. She looked at me like she was waiting for me to explode, but I didn't have the energy for anger. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling. Tell me everything. She nodded slowly. After you left, I didn't know what to do. I was a mess. I searched for you, Ethan. I really did. I even hired someone to track you down, but you covered your tracks too well. And then, a few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. She glanced at the boy, who was now tracing shapes on the couch with his finger. I didn't know how to tell you. Hell, I didn't even know if you'd care. You left without a word. I thought. She stopped herself, shaking her head. It doesn't matter now. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you try harder? Emily's eyes flashed with something sharp. Try harder? She repeated, voice tight. Ethan, I tried everything. I didn't even know if you were alive. You disappeared without a trace. No note, no explanation. I had no idea if you left because of me or because of something else entirely. I clenched my jaw, looking away. I had left because of her, because of what I had found. But now wasn't the time to open old wounds. Instead, I focused on the only thing that mattered now. Him. I turned to the boy. What's his name? Emily hesitated, then spoke softly. Noah. Noah. I let the name settle in my mind. Felt strange, foreign, but it was his. My son's. I looked back at him. He was still watching me, head tilted slightly. He didn't know who I was. To him, I was just some man who had shown up out of nowhere. The realization twisted something deep inside me. I don't expect anything from you, Emily said suddenly. I thought you should know, especially now. I frowned. Because of his heart. She nodded. The doctors say it's treatable, but he'll need surgery. It's risky and expensive. I inhaled deeply, rubbing my temples. This was too much, too fast. But I had no one to blame for that but myself. I turned back to Noah. He was still swinging his feet, completely oblivious to the storm raging between the adults in the room. Does he know? I asked, voice quiet. Emily hesitated. Not yet. I didn't know how to tell him. I exhaled. Then maybe it's time he found out. Emily's breath hitched, her eyes searching mine. I didn't know what she was looking for, but whatever it was, I wasn't sure if I could give it to her. But one thing was clear. I wasn't leaving this time. Noah deserved to know the truth. And so did I. Noah yawned, his tiny fingers rubbing at his eyes, completely unaware of the emotional wreckage sitting right in front of him. He had no idea who I was, what I meant to him, or the weight of the moment. He was just a kid, sleepy from a long day, looking at me like I was any other stranger in his mother's house. And I was. For 3 years, I had been nothing but a ghost, a name he had never heard, a face he had never seen. And yet, I sat there staring at him, knowing deep down that every choice I had made had led me to this moment. I cleared my throat, shifting uncomfortably in my seat. So, Noah. I started, my voice cracking in a way that made me feel more pathetic than I already did. Do you like cars? Noah blinked at me, his tiny hands still fidgeting with the hem of his hoodie. Emily's hoodie, I realized. Something about that made my throat tighten. He wasn't just my son. He was hers too. He had grown up with her, learned everything from her, probably picked up her habits. I had missed it all. He shrugged. Yeah, I guess. I forced a small smile. Yeah, me too. I fixed them for a living. His little eyebrows furrowed. You mean like a mechanic? Yeah, I said. I work at a shop. I fix engines, change tires, make cars run when they don't want to. Noah seemed to consider this for a moment. Then his face lit up in a way I wasn't prepared for. That's cool. He kicked his feet excitedly. Mom's car is old. It makes a funny noise sometimes. Emily let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. It's fine, baby. It still works. Noah looked back at me, his expression suddenly serious. Can you fix it? My throat tightened. I didn't know why. Maybe it was the simplicity of the question, the innocence of it. He wasn't asking me where I had been or why I wasn't around. He wasn't asking me if I was his father. He was asking me if I could fix something broken. I exhaled, nodding. Yeah, buddy. I can fix it. Emily's face softened, but she didn't say anything. The room fell into a silence that was heavier than before. I glanced at Noah, who was now fighting to keep his eyes open. He yawned again, stretching his arms above his head before slumping against Emily's side. She ran her fingers through his hair, the kind of instinctive, gentle motion only a mother could do. Couldn't look away. This was my life. The one I had abandoned. The one I had convinced myself I didn't need. But looking at them now, sitting together like this, I felt the cracks forming in the walls I had spent years building. Emily sighed, breaking the silence. I should put him to bed. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yeah. She stood carefully, lifting Noah into her arms. He mumbled something sleepily, his face buried in her shoulder, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. As she carried him toward the hallway, she paused, glancing back at me. Stay, she said softly. We still have a lot to talk about. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. Yeah, I know. And then she was gone, disappearing into the hallway with Noah in her arms. I sat there, staring at the spot where they had just been, my mind spinning. I had come back looking for answers, but now I wasn't sure I was ready for them. And for the first time in years, I didn't know what to do next. I sat there alone in the dimly lit living room, staring at the framed photos on the wall. Most of them were of Noah. His first birthday, his tiny hands covered in cake. A snapshot of him laughing on a swing. Moments I had missed. A life I had never been part of. And yet, here I was. Here he was. I had spent 3 years convincing myself that disappearing had been the right thing to do. That cutting ties meant I was free. But looking at those pictures, at the warmth and love they held, I realized something I hadn't been ready to admit before. I hadn't run away from Emily. I had run away from myself, from the fear of facing what had happened, from the pain of betrayal, from the shame of knowing that no matter how far I ran, I'd always carry the weight of the past. But running had cost me more than I ever realized. I had a son, a little boy who didn't know me but who had smiled at me like I was someone worth knowing. And for the first time in a long time I wanted to be. I heard soft footsteps behind me. Emily. She walked into the room, arms crossed, leaning against the doorway. She looked tired more than just physically. A deep, emotional exhaustion. And yet, her expression wasn't hostile. It wasn't even guarded. It was just open. "You okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. I let out a breath, shaking my head with a small, tired chuckle. "I have no idea." She smiled just a little. "Yeah, me neither." A comfortable silence settled between us. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since I walked through that door, I saw not just the woman from my past, but the woman she had become. A mother, someone who had raised a child on her own, without support, without answers, without me. And yet she wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. She had called me, let me back in, given me the chance to know the truth. I ran a hand over my face. "I don't know how to fix this, Emily," she sighed, stepping forward. "Neither do I. But maybe we don't have to figure it all out right now." I looked up at her. "Then what do we do?" She sat down across from me, folding her hands in her lap. "We start with one thing at a time." A pause. Then softly, "You stay." I swallowed hard. Could I? Did I deserve to? But then I thought about Noah. The way he had looked at me. The way he had smiled. And I knew my answer. I nodded slowly. "Okay." Emily let out a small, relieved breath. "Okay." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a neatly tied-up ending. But it was a beginning. And for the first time in years, I wasn't running anymore. I was home.